Today I'm in Baywood Park in the Belle Meade subdivision of Miami, and I want to talk about poverty in America because poverty is no longer what you think it is. You know, poverty used to be defined as somebody who made a very low income and just didn't have the money to survive in the economy, okay? And in the early 1960s, an economist named Molly Orshansky created the poverty line using simple logic. And that logic was that food should take up only 1/3 of a household's budget. So poverty was defined as 3 times the cost of a basic food plan. And at that time, that was acceptable because housing was cheap, healthcare was practically non-existent as a cost, and college was pocket change compared to what it is today. And the problem is, when this was invented back in the 1960s, that formula has never changed. The prices on everything has changed, the cost of living has changed dramatically, and we have entirely brand new categories of expenses that we never had back then. But one thing that never changed is how the poverty line works and is calculated. So today I want to break down the numbers behind the poverty line and what it really should be. Because according to many economists now, the cost of the poverty line is actually $140,000, not the official 32 grand, guys. So you heard that properly. If you make less than $140,000, you should actually be considered below the poverty line based on the calculations I'm about to outline. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually poor, because obviously a lot of people make significantly less than that and do okay and actually live very high quality lives, okay? But this is based on how much the cost of living has gone up today and all the extra categories that are included in that we never had to deal with. Like, for example, food, which was the main driving factor of the poverty line back in the day, is not even close anymore. Today, food is only about 5 to 7% of a person's household budget. Meanwhile, home prices and the cost to keep a roof over your head have completely exploded. Healthcare coverage is outrageous now, especially after this whole government shutdown. College, that became a mortgage payment. Transportation costs have ballooned in all sorts of different ways, especially if you need to buy a car. Childcare has exploded, and most families now need 2 cars and have more than 1 kid. And so all of those expenses that we just outlined above, a lot of people didn't even have back in the day, and now everyone has those expenses, and they're more expensive than ever. So if you update the math that the original economist that came up with the poverty line did, the poverty threshold for a family of 4 would land somewhere between 130 and 150 grand, guys. That is just unbelievable when you think about it. And here's how this shakes out. It's not just me saying this. These aren't even my numbers. These aren't my calculations. This is what the economists today are saying, okay? When you look at child care, people are paying over 32 grand a year. Housing's over 23 grand a year. Food's over 14 grand a year. Transportation's over 14 grand a year. Healthcare's over 10 grand a year. And all the rest of the household essentials are about $22,000 a year. Plus you have taxes on top of that. And if you add it all up, you need roughly $140,000 just to be able to function in today's society, not thrive. That's just to pay the bills and get by. And of course, we're talking about a family of 4. If you're just a single person, you're going to need significantly less. So why is this a problem? Well, for obvious reasons, because the median household income in the country is barely over $80,000 at around $83,000. So that's about a $53,000 shortfall between what people earn and what life really costs right now. So no wonder everything feels broken, guys. It doesn't feel broken, it is broken. And that's because this entire economy is now perpetuated on a system of debt. It has been this way for a while, but the longer that we have run things this way, the more out of control everything has gotten, and the more people have to go into debt just to be able to keep up with regular expenses. And that's the real issue that we're all facing. And let's face it, people have a lot of other expenses that you need just to participate in life right now, like a smartphone. Do you really need to have it? Not really, but in order to function as a practical adult today, you kind of do. You need to have reliable internet too. I mean, you wouldn't even be watching this video right now if you didn't have a reliable internet connection. You need multiple devices for schoolwork or your job. You need digital access for banking, healthcare, even identity verification. Like, everything is over the phone, guys. Like, I had to call the credit card company the other day. They verify your identity by sending you a text message to your phone and reading off the secret code. Okay, like, if you don't have a cell phone, that makes things a little more complicated. And they might say, well, you can just do it by email. Well, how are you going to do that if you don't have reliable internet service, right? So these are all things that people need to have these days that you just didn't need, 70 years ago. And the problem a lot of people face when they try to get out of poverty is you lose some of the benefits that you receive when you're in poverty if you just climb slightly out of it. Like, for example, at above $45,000 of income, you lose Medicaid, and after $65,000 of income, you lose child care subsidies. So for every dollar you earn, you can lose 70 to 100 cents through higher taxes and lost benefits. So it's really hard to bridge the gap between becoming lower income and middle class. And that could be one of the reasons why the labor force participation rate is so low, because a lot of people are not incentivized to go above it because they're not going to be able to make enough to support the lifestyle and the benefits they're already getting right now from the government. So they choose not to, and they choose to make less and stay in poverty in order to receive those things for free, because the opportunities available to them are not good enough to increase their income substantially above where it needs to be in order to pay for things. I'm not saying there's no opportunity in this country. I'm just saying if you're looking at getting a regular job, that is the case for a lot of people, unfortunately. And it's interesting because if we look back during the lockdowns and the pandemic, a lot of people actually had things pretty easy, right? Because during this time frame, nobody had to pay for childcare. Everybody was staying home. A lot of people didn't have to pay for commuting. Everyone was staying home. There were no transportation costs. There was not much eating out. People were afraid to go to restaurants. And there was no office-related expenses. But then when everything opened back up, fast forward a few years later, everything is 50 to 100% more expensive now, depending on what category of item or inflation you are looking at. And I'm afraid that there's not going to be any semblance of this sort of feeling in America ever again, not at least for a very long time, unless we decide to become more financially responsible in this country, not only from a federal level, but even on a personal level as well. The reality is that this economy today looks nothing like it did back in 1963 when the poverty line was created. And this puts pretty much everybody below the poverty line. Like 90% of Americans are going to be below the poverty line if you use this $140,000 marker. But of course, the government's never going to raise it to that, just like you're never going to get the cost of living increases that you should get relative to what the real cost of living would be for Social Security, just like people don't get the real wage increases that they're supposed to, which we'll talk about later in this video, because I did a poll of you guys on my channel, and there's some interesting information that we found out about the raises that people are or are not getting today.